Welcome back to Klepper's Corner. Today in history. Segment 1 and New Rome, free downloads and crowns with delayed shipping. May 11th opens with Power learning one of its oldest tricks. If the old headquarters is inconvenient, rename a better location and pretend destiny handled the paperwork. In 330, Emperor Constantine dedicated Constantinople, the city he called New Rome, on the old site of Byzantium. Rome still had prestige and marble nostalgia, but the empire's pressure points were now the Danube, the Euphrates, and every border where someone with a spear had a scheduling conflict. Constantinople sat on the Bosporus like a security camera with aqueducts. Constantine shipped Roman identity east: Senate, law, ceremony, and chariot racing. Because even when empires relocate, they insist the old office furniture is part of the Constitution. Then in 868, the Diamond Sutra was printed in Tang, China, giving us the earliest surviving dated printed book. And the first great print milestone was not a tax manual or celebrity confession. It was a Buddhist text about emptiness and non-attachment, distributed freely to the world. Basically, the original open source Enlightenment patch. In 973, Edgar the Peaceful was crowned in Bath after ruling England for 14 years, which is less an inauguration than a very expensive confirmation email. That ceremony helped build the template for English monarchy: sacred oil, oaths, robes, and the useful suggestion that God had reviewed the org chart. May 11th begins by showing authority in 3 durable forms: move the capital, print the idea, and crown the ruler only after everyone has already stopped arguing. Segment 2 and battlefields, river maps, and parliamentary chaos. By the 18th and early 19th centuries, power had become more polished and somehow better at getting people killed with paperwork nearby. In 1745, the Battle of Fontenoy unfolded during the War of the Austrian Succession, where an inheritance dispute became thousands of men in Belgium discovering that royal family drama had an artillery budget. Marshal Maurice de Saxe arranged the French defenses with brutal skill, and the British-led Allied army under the young Duke of Cumberland drove straight into overlapping fire. The French nearly cracked until the Irish Brigade charged with bayonets and helped break the British advance, turning the battle into a bloody French victory and a reminder that exile and sharp steel can be a persuasive committee. In 1792, Captain Robert Gray sailed the Columbia Rediviva into the great river of the Pacific Northwest and named it the Columbia. His charting became evidence for American claims to the Oregon country, because empire has always loved the phrase, "Our guy drew it first." Indigenous peoples had known the river for generations, but once a trading captain wrote things down, diplomats acted as if geography had submitted a purchase order. In 1812, orderly power cracked inside the House of Commons when British Prime Minister Spencer Perceval was shot dead by John Bellingham, a furious merchant consumed by grievance. Perceval's policies had caused deep misery, and in some industrial areas, his assassination was met not with solemn grief, but with public relief, which is a fairly strong review of your administration. These stories share a theme. Governments love seals, maps, and procedure, but underneath is a machine running on ambition, fear, and catastrophic grievance. Segment 3 and mutiny, ironclads, and old worlds catching fire. The 19th century specialized in moments when old systems discovered that being old is not the same as being permanent. In 1857, mutinous sepoys from Meerut reached Delhi and dragged the elderly Mughal emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar into the center of a rebellion he neither planned nor had the power to command. He was in his 80s, a poet and pensioner more than a battlefield monarch. And suddenly, armed men were demanding that he become the symbolic emperor of Hindustan. That is not leadership succession. That is history kicking in your door during morning prayers and saying, "Congratulations, you are the logo now." The uprising grew from East India Company arrogance, annexations, military resentment, cultural contempt, and the cartridge controversy that fused fear with fury. Once Delhi joined the revolt, a localized mutiny became a massive anti-colonial war. and the violence became horrific on all sides. The rebellion ended company rule, not because Britain found humility, but because London decided colonial domination should no longer be subcontracted to a corporation with a flag, an army, and the emotional regulation of a loan shark. 5 years later, in 1862, the Confederate ironclad CSS Virginia met its own end. Rebuilt from the burned hull of the USS Merrimack, the Virginia had fought the USS Monitor and announced that wooden warships were now floating antiques with cannon ports. But after Union forces captured Norfolk, the Virginia could not retreat up shallow waters or escape to sea. So the Confederates burned and blew up their prized iron monster. Between Delhi and Hampton Roads, May 11th shows old orders collapsing in smoke, blood, and scrap metal, while the future arrives with armored plating and terrible paperwork. Segment 4, and airships, Oscars, and evil in office clothes. The 20th century brings flight over frozen emptiness, glamour over labor anxiety, and justice chasing a man who thought a fake name could bury genocide. In 1926, the airship Norge departed from Svalbard on its attempt to cross the North Pole, led by Roald Amundsen, piloted by Umberto Nobili, and backed by Lincoln Ellsworth. It became the first fully verified expedition to reach the pole and fly across the polar ice cap. It was also a hydrogen-filled tube packed with cold, noise, danger, and competing male pride, which is basically a group project at 5,000 feet. Amundsen and Nobili clashed over credit, flags, and national prestige, because even at the top of the world, humanity looked around and said, yes, but whose branding is largest? In 1927, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences took shape in Los Angeles. Today, we associate the Academy with Oscars, gowns, speeches, and actors pretending they had not mentally rehearsed the walk to the stage since childhood. But Louis B. Mayer's original vision was partly a company union, a studio-friendly institution meant to manage labor disputes before writers, actors, and technicians organized too much independence. Hollywood's Temple of Artistic Honor began as a labor control strategy with better lighting. Then, in 1960, Israeli agents captured Adolf Eichmann near Buenos Aires, where he lived as Ricardo Klement. Eichmann had helped organize the logistics of the Holocaust, and his trial in Jerusalem forced the world to hear survivor testimony in direct human detail. The disturbing lesson was not that evil always looks monstrous. It can look ordinary, careful, and administrative, run by men who treat murder like a transport problem. Segment 5, and futility, machines, and the desert shaking back. The late 20th century, on May 11th, feels like modern life holding up warning labels and watching humanity ignore them. In 1969, American and South Vietnamese forces fought for Dong Ap Bia, better known as Hamburger Hill, during the Vietnam War. Soldiers climbed through mud, jungle, machine gun fire, and close combat for 10 brutal days to seize a hill abandoned soon afterward. The nickname said everything. Men felt chewed up by a battle whose purpose was harder to defend than the terrain itself. Back home, outrage grew because Hamburger Hill compressed the larger war into one awful image: courage at the bottom, confusion at the top, and strategy demanding more receipts. In 1997, IBM's Deep Blue defeated Garry Kasparov, and humanity began worrying that machines were becoming too clever. Kasparov was a world champion, facing a calculating engine that did not get tired, doubt itself, or spend lunch replaying a bad move with existential dread. One move Kasparov saw as mysterious brilliance was later linked to a software bug, meaning the future may have first intimidated us by glitching confidently. Then, in 1998, India's Operation Shakti nuclear tests shook the Rajasthan desert and declared a new nuclear reality in South Asia. The operation was prepared through secrecy, satellite evasion, and national defiance, with scientists timing movements around American spy satellites like the world's most consequential game of hide and seek. From Hamburger Hill to Deep Blue to Pokhran, the pattern is clear. Modern systems promise control, then reveal the human impulses inside them: fear, pride, genius, calculation, and the belief that pressing the button proves you understand the machine. In conclusion, May 11th gives us capitals renamed, sacred texts printed, crowns delayed, battlefields soaked, rivers claimed, prime ministers murdered, empires shaken, iron monsters destroyed, airships crossing frozen horizons, Hollywood polishing labor anxiety into trophies, Nazi fugitives pulled from hiding, hills abandoned, machines beating champions, and deserts trembling under nuclear fire. It is not a tidy line of progress. It is a filing cabinet knocked over during an earthquake. Brilliant ideas, terrible decisions, sacred ceremonies, and human arrogance scattered everywhere.